What's up, y'all? This is the Blerd Bar. We've already been having a time. These lights are doing something, and we've been laughing.
It's warm as hell.
Who am I? I am Jayhawk. Last descendant of Yasuke, sub overdub for all anime, salsa dance, and ninja stay on his toes. Got a Psyche flight ready to go. It's your boy Hawkins Hanzo. What's up? And two Pterosaur. Dude, I can. Our other host here.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Rich the Architect. That's all I got.
I
don't got a platter to serve up.
Let's go, light skin. Let's go, red bone. What you got?
Whoa. We just ended.
Descendant of the sun.
Here we are. Oh my goodness. We have two amazing guests with us today. This is the Blerd Bar side quest, not to be confused with our season, but it's okay. It's okay. They will be back for the season when we have the season. Mm-hmm. But we have two amazing guests. We have Enoch and Lindo here. Please introduce yourselves as you see fit.
You want to go first?
Yeah, what's good, what's poppin', what's good, what it is, what it do, what's up. My name is Lindo. Yes, I'm a award-winning spoken word poet and comic book writer. And
Word. And I'm Enoch. Sometimes I go by Enoch the poet, but I really be trying to drop the poet part off because I do more than just write poetry. I'm a poet, manga writer, trauma-informed educator, program director, black human being living on the spectrum. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
That's a job in itself.
Yeah, a nigga alive is a job.
So you just add levels of difficulty.
Yeah,
like, oh, it's not real.
For real, bro. I was born on hard mode.
Right.
And you just gotta adapt.
Right.
Today we will be talking about a number of things. I'm sure there's gonna be rabbit holes because
Plenty.
the pre-show was crazy. But we are promoting their two manga and comic series, Pawnshop, which is by Lindo. It's not out yet, but we're going to talk about what we can talk about without spoilers, I'm guessing. You know?
Sure.
Spoilers.
Maybe a little bit, maybe. And then we have Immortal Dark, which is a manga. And we're going to talk about that. And his stuff is actually out. I think you got like 3 issues out?
Yeah, 3 issues out.
Yeah. So you can definitely find that in the links down below. Let's get into it. Who we gonna talk about first? Who wants to get into it first?
I feel like this is a roasted session.
Right.
Who wants it first?
I feel like so far, because we've been on like a string of interviews.
Yeah.
I feel like they usually start with you.
Okay, well, whatever the Blerd Bar wanted to do.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what we want.
Oh, okay, cool.
Don't be that person.
Outside inside. Here we go.
This is wild. But here we are.
Side note, we did, or at least I did. I'm not gonna put you on blast or anything, but I know I just did. But I listened to the podcast, the interview with our sister podcast, The Bots. Blerd on the Street.
Yeah.
That was a great podcast. I have some questions from that one. But first up, how old are y'all, if y'all don't mind me asking? Because you were talking about computer paper, and I was like, there's only a certain brand of person who knows computer paper.
I'm going to tell y'all right now, y'all not getting this nigga age.
Okay, fair enough.
I am 33, though.
Okay.
Yeah, cancer baby, born July 5th, 91.
Cool.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Nice, okay. All right. I'm trying to guess. Let me think. You said I'm not going to guess it.
No, you're not going to get it. He's not going to tell you.
It's
what I'm saying.
Okay.
You can guess all you want.
You might be
not going to
correct,
confirm or deny.
Right.
And he don't even got no leads. You could be close and he's just still going to be.
Fair enough.
Was you an outside kid or inside kid?
Doing what?
Was you an that's the question. Was you an outside kid or was you an inside kid?
What did we do? I don't know.
Like outside playing or was you inside playing?
That's what it meant. Was you an outside kid?
Both.
See, this is what I'm talking about.
Doing both.
What?
Parents gave him options.
You have you ever realized how your parents kept you oppressed? You go over your friend's crib and they drinking juice while they eating, and you always had to wait for the juice after you finish eating.
So I never thought about it, but it was spoken of. Like, why you not drinking? I was like, I just like to eat my food first. And like, you don't like to.
You were just
There's a difference.
There's a difference.
Conditioning.
It was all conditioning.
I guess. All right. In the way that I wrote my notes and questions, Enoch, you first.
Okay,
All right, that's
cool.
fine.
All right. Immortal Dark.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Enoch is from North Side Wilmington.
Yeah, that's very
That-
important.
Yeah. Why is that very important?
Couple reasons. As much as I love Philadelphia and also consider Philly a second home, I mean, I moved up here for a reason, you know what I'm saying? I also think it's always important to like keep where you are from in your scope, always. One, because I think it's a point of connection for me in the sense that I'm never too far from where I started, and that helps me relate to people who are in positions I may not be in anymore. Two, on a more like ego-driven side, people be thinking niggas in Wilmington not talented,
That's fair.
right? And like they also be thinking because people drive down 95 and they think that's all of Delaware, which is not. There is also like a level of like not fully understanding what being in Wilmington is like. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like there was a point in time where we were the most dangerous city in America. Like we had the highest murder rate per capita, right? Niggas was calling us Murder Town USA and shit. And so another reason that I keep like that North Side Wilmington aspect always visible is because I am talented. So you are gonna know like there are niggas with high level skill from Wilmington. And when I'm talking about my lived experiences, when you're hearing my poetry, when you're hearing all these things, you'll also understand that being from Delaware, essentially, even though like similarly to Philadelphia, I do not claim all of Delaware. I just claim Wilmington, right?
Fair enough.
It's not synonymous with like privilege. You know what I'm saying? Size of a city has nothing to do with the level of resources they do or do not have. Nor does notoriety or visibility. So yeah, I always keep that at the front.
Cool. You got a question for him? Or?
Oh, no. I was just clearing my car.
But I'm asking, do you have any?
Oh, sorry. I thought you was
I'm
going
asking
to
if we want to go back and
My
forth.
bad. Sorry. So actually, okay, so I do have a question.
Don't let him bully you.
It's all right. It's okay. It's fine. It's okay. This is the same space. Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know, the way we open the show, right?
So speaking to the creative part,
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to maybe I'm jumping the gun in your note page, but I kind of wanted to dive into like what influenced you into like getting into the craft of becoming a creative. And it's because you're multifaceted that I say a creative and not specifically poetry, not specifically illustration, not specifically story writing. So, a creative.
Yeah. So this is a clarifying question. Are we saying like a creative in terms of me deciding to engage with art forms, or are we talking creative in terms of like career?
Art form.
Art forms?
Mm-hmm.
Not to sound like too, I don't know, esoteric or like cliche or whatever, but I genuinely feel like the practice of creating is like one of the most godlike abilities that we have, and one of the most like natural abilities that we have, right? Like there's so much systemically that drives a wedge between us and our creative bodies, or actually, to be even more specific, us and our ability to acknowledge our creative bodies, that I feel like it is almost as necessary as like breathing, right? And I just had an interview the other night, and the host Damon, he asked me a similar question of like, you know, why do you create? And I brought up an example of I recently ran a workshop for the school district around like making more arts rich schools, like more arts rich spaces in schools. And starting off, I was like, you know, how many of y'all in here, and this was like district administrators, teachers, principals, so on and so forth. How many of y'all identify as artists? Like 3 people raised their hands. I was like, how many of y'all identify as creatives? You know, a couple more people raised their hands. I was like, how many of y'all have worried about a problem that didn't happen yet? Everybody raised their hand.
Mm-hmm.
How many of y'all have been with a partner that y'all envisioned a whole life with? Everybody raised their hand. Those 2 first things are all about perception. Oh, I'm not an artist. I'm not creative. Being anxious is creative. and like
in the worst way.
Yeah.
The most destructive
but it
way.
is creative,
Yeah.
right? Because creativity, like, we treat it like it's like inherently positive, but it's not. It's a neutral term, right? The same way that envisioning a life with somebody requires creativity. I'm having such real visualization of something, but that my body has an actual emotional response to it, right? That is creativity. And so we are all always in the practice of being creative. I mean, neuroplasticity in my mind is creativity, right? Like the process of thinking up a pattern or habit, going through the practice of engaging and solidifying that pattern or habit as a neural pathway in my brain. I am scientifically and tangibly formulating something in my mind that doesn't exist, that is manifesting itself in the real world, right? So we are inherently creative. So like, it really wasn't too much of a conscious decision on my part to like be creative. I think I was fortunate enough to have a mom that wanted me to explore things and wanted to support my exploration, even if it was like against something she desired.
Sure.
And I come from like a pretty artsy family, and so I think my creativity went down the art funnel, because I also would argue like all of us are creative.
Sure.
I think math is creative, right? Like all of these things, but specifically like funneling my creativity through the arts, I think was just like a manifestation of just having a parent who was down to facilitate and support my exploration of different mediums of expression.
Gotcha.
I would love to pass that question to you as well.
About like what made you
what made you,
I think it's very similar to Enoch, but it's just like different language. It was the only way I felt like I had a superpower. It was a way that I could combat a lot of just like the things that are going on in my life. So like when he speaks about anxiety, I was like, that's my origin story. You know, I was anticipating like having so many embarrassing moments with people that I started trying to rehearse conversations, anticipating that they would happen, so I could be the most impenetrable person, and then that became really poetic. And then therefore I was like, that's my power, poems. You know?
Yeah.
That's cool. And interesting, because we just did a interview with Willa Eason, who is the creator of Sunman, who is like the first black action figure. And the whole reason why she even created that was because she was having a conversation with her son, and I think somehow the question of like, oh, like, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a superhero or something when you grow up? And he said like, well, I can't be a superhero because I'm black. Because he never saw, at that time, there were none. Like, He-Man was a big thing. And so, like, you know, everything he saw, He-Man and everybody else was like, white. He's like, well, then I can't be a superhero. So it's interesting that you say, like, that was your superpower. Like, I think that's a huge, I don't know. I feel like there's a huge through line of, like, African-American history of, like, from being not seen and not having representation to being like, well, this is like now my superpower. This is what I'm going to do with my creativity. Like, I think that's really dope. That's cool. Enoch, you're a fan of anime and manga.
Absolutely.
Why bring your creativity and your art form and place it as a manga as instead of a comic or even like a book?
There was a level of like visibility and humanism that I experienced as a child and still as an adult when I'm absorbing like anime or manga content, right? Specifically as it relates to like, I feel like American mediums can tend to be very black and white.
Okay.
And I don't mean like black and white in like a racial sense, but black and white is in like there's a clear good guy, there's a clear villain.
Mm-hmm.
Villain is maniacal or, you know, does such horrible things, and the good guy or good person or hero is so altruistic and da 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 da. And it's like that wasn't my lived experience, right? Like growing up in a economically underserviced environment, there were a lot of good people who I saw do detrimental things, and there were a lot of harmful people that I saw do good things, right? And anime, because anime kind of was my entry point into manga.
Sure.
Anime was like some of the first content I absorbed that showcased that gray area, right? Like, and that's not to say that there aren't like black and white animes to that extent, but at least from my experience, a lot of what I was absorbing was not that. Like Dragon Ball Z was my gateway, as like most people, and I would say Dragon Ball Z can be kind of black and white. But then, like literally right after discovering Dragon Ball Z, I discovered Yu Yu Hakusho, right? And you know, Yusuke is this poor kid, street thug, growing up in a single mom household, very misunderstood. The first like episode, he's very much marketed as like a non-likable person, right? And then we see like glimpses of these likable traits, and then, you know, he gets killed and becomes a spirit detective and all these things. And I mean,
Spoiler alert.
He got a, you know,
I
spirit
hope not. I
gun.
hope everybody saw it by now. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's wild.
That's wild. I'm not gatekeeping, but you ain't seen Yu Hakusho in 2025.
Yeah,
that's
right.
wild.
But yeah, these were all things that like felt very true to my lived experience, and then to Lindo's point, also like provided a fantastical outlet compared to like an American movie or TV show where I might see somebody poor, and like we know how that shit go, right? It's like, oh, you got the poor family, and then you got the one smart kid who's about to go to college, and then he gets killed, and it causes his gangbanger homie to like realize like, man, this shit ain't worth it. And it's like, bro,
I feel like I've seen this before.
and it's like, bro, this shit is dumb sad, and the only nigga perceived to have potential is dead, right? Whereas in like Yu Yu Hakusho, it's like the person who had the potential and the person who was perceived to not have potential were in the same body, right? And then there was his way out, even though he still like died, right? His way out was much more fantastical and empowering because he became he played a very pivotal role in like all the fights moving forward, right? And so I was like, damn, like I am not just relegated to suffering, you know what I'm saying, in these ways, and I can expand past my suffering. And anime was like the first thing that really showed me that. And then like going to the bookstore with my mom, because my mom is an avid reader. My mom is also like a big nerd, like she's a Trekkie and all those things. I'm like, all right, well, like what's this manga shit about? Then I learned like, oh, most animes are just mangas that, you know, got turned into animes. And so then it like just started like this whole thing, and I could definitely say like 75% of what I watch and read is Japanese for sure.
That's dope.
That's pretty good.
Same question. Why? Because you are considering your product a comic book. It is a comic book. So like, why a comic book and not like an actual book? Especially with you both being poets, right? Like,
I mean, for me, it was just, I didn't realize this until Enoch started talking. It was just my entry level. Like, my entry level wasn't manga. My entry level was like, I'm watching these cartoons that are American, like X-Men, all that stuff. And then I'm like, oh, they got comic books that go further in the story. And then not only is it just like those things, it's other stories that's not even televised.
It's like a gold mine.
Yeah. So like my first graphic novel I picked up that I was really invested into, like I picked up comic books here and there, and I was like, it was kind of like trivial, collective. I just want to have an edge on my like friends and stuff. But like prior to Baghdad, and I was like, this is like the Lion King, Animal Farm, but better. That just changed things for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, someone just drew out 64 pages, or maybe it was like 100, and I was like, wow. And they wrote this amount, and it wasn't meant for kids. It was meant for like adults, and I was like, I'm reading it. It was so exciting, and you know, I'm getting into poetry at the time, so I'm not constantly thinking about like putting my stuff in comic books and graphic novels, but visually, I want people to feel that way when I'm on stage, that they're getting something fantastical, animated, that they couldn't get otherwise unless they sat down with it. Because like people at my shows are like at coffee shops and stuff like that, so they sit with my poetry, and that's how I sit with a graphic novel. So I wanted to give them that same experience.
That's dope. Anything?
I was
click clacking away.
Huh? Sorry. So I was gonna this question for both of you. I myself am an artist, so my background's in architecture, hence the name, right? And so, as a kid, I was on, my grandma's stoop, just like creating all these little like worlds with my like little G.I. Joe figurines and stuff. And it would look like anything that CGI tries to do today. Like in my mind, like that's how it looked. And so for me, like I chose architecture because in like the cliche realm, like it was the largest way I could express my creativity, right? So I guess kind of trickling off of the backgrounds that you both gave, like the big question that I still have is why these mediums? Like as a painter, like why acrylic paint? Why oil on canvas? Why did you choose these mediums to express your creativity through? I know you alluded to it a little bit with your family's influence of being artists. But why? Like why this is what I'm going to do? And so, or Enoch, if you want to take that away.
Mine is a little tricky because I started in one art form and then transitioned to another, and then like kind of circled back, but just on a different side. So what I mean by that is like before doing poetry, I used to draw. Like that was my thing. And like I would, like you had brought up, staple computer sheets together and like make comics. And like me making comics was really, I think, a combination of me identifying that I like to draw, and then also like the like immense level of confidence my mom nurtured in me. So it's like I'm watching these stories, and similar to like the Sunman thing, I'm just like I don't see myself visually in none of these. Like I see myself theoretically in like these things.
Like Piccolo.
Yeah, I'll be like, we need to stop calling Piccolo black.
Bro, you're not. You are anti-Piccolo is black.
No, it's not that I'm anti that Piccolo is supposed to represent a black character. I think we just need to stop accepting that as okay. That's because that's a different thing.
Say more.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I think I know where you're going with this.
I just feel like we know what it's supposed to represent, but like it also feels like scarcity mindset to me. Because we know there aren't a lot of black anime characters, we then latch on to characters that are supposed to serve that role, and then it doesn't create a need to actually give us the thing we want to see. Right?
Okay.
Because we're just like, oh well, you're like, yeah, we do want more black characters, but like Piccolo black, you know what I'm saying? It's like, how about we just be like, no, this actually is not sufficient.
Sure.
Right? But on the same token, I also am not necessarily big on asking more Japanese animators to create more black characters. They are doing what we want to do. Japanese people are creating content about Japanese people full of Japanese characters. I have nothing against that. Instead, I feel like there needs to be more opportunities created for black people to be in that space so that we can do the same thing. Right. But the whole like stop calling Piccolo black thing is really just like getting away from the scarcity mindset energy of it all. You know what I'm saying?
I don't disagree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
But there was something when you said that. I feel like Piccolo wasn't meant to represent black people.
That's fair.
But I do feel like black people were like him.
He's our guy.
He's
Like,
our
he's
guy.
our, we found him.
We
And
did.
because to your point, like the scarcity, right?
Mhm.
Because there was very much not representation.
I mean, it
for
was
us.
either him or Mr. Popo.
Right, and definitely didn't identify with him
At all.
at that time.
Yeah.
But like growing up watching anime like that and seeing that there is this one character, and oftentimes in stories, the black character either changes form, is represented differently. Skeeter Valentine, like there's things like that where you're like, I know he's a black guy. Like he's got the talk, he's got the walk. Like this is a black guy.
Or he's just blue.
But he's just purple or blue. Like so it's oftentimes that's how minorities are represented, right?
Yeah.
Like in animations in general, is that they're a different color, they're a different species, they're something other than what is the normal, the industry standard, right? And even in Japanese anime, yes, they are. There are a lot of like either Japanese culture, people, but the imagery that is depicted is often sometimes more so Western influence versus like strictly Japanese, right? Like so when you have a community of people, like I joke about it, that's why he reacted like that, is because if you watch our interview with Wyla and the owners of Multiverse, I said that my first experience with a black character was Piccolo. When we were talking about like when was your introduction to like representation in like any type of industry, be it toys, and I was like, Piccolo, it was. I know he's not black, but he was the closest thing that I had at the time. So it's so I just find I find it interesting.
That is, and also I think, at least for me, listening to Piccolo and like his mannerisms, it was like if anybody's gonna be black, it's Piccolo.
Yeah, if anybody's gonna be.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Sure. Fair enough.
Octavia Butler had an interview where she's talking about being on a panel, and one of the white creators says just like, I don't need to create black characters because we have aliens.
Whoa.
Oh,
That's
no. That's a hot
And
take.
it speaks to what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So just to highlight what Enoch says, just like if because of the sacred scarcity, there's such acceptance even within the kind of just like white creative mind that I don't have to do so. You would just accept the other, whatever I deem as other, as you.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think sometimes we internalize that we are other, when actually we're the norm.
Right.
We're very much the norm.
True.
And I think it's possible to like say like, yo, I align with this character, and I'm big on like word choice, right? And so like I think it's cool to be like, yo, I fuck with Piccolo. He feels black to me, solid, but don't be
not.
he not black.
So
bro.
he's not at your table at the
Piccolo?
cookout. Yeah.
No,
he's not
bro,
invited?
he's not a nigga. he not even human, right? And so it's like,
I mean, Namek.
what?
He is like,
All right,
it's just
so
wordplay.
No, because if we being 100% honest, right? You never, as homophobic as niggas is, you not finna find a self-populating planet of niggas laying eggs. That shit ain't happening, bro. They pausing the whole planet, unfortunately, right? So it's like,
This hot takes today.
Piccolo not black, and we shouldn't be calling him black because I feel like it just promotes
Black
that
adjacent?
ideology. Black adjacent is fine.
Black adjacent.
Yeah, I'm cool with black adjacent.
He was the only like urban character. Not even urban.
He
wasn't
urban. He
He
wasn't
was just-
urban.
He was just a stern father figure. That's all.
Bro, honestly, like that's it. He didn't speak much.
Yeah.
And I even think there's something to interrogate around like what qualities about Piccolo we deem as black in the first place.
Ooh.
Right? Because it's like,
This
what?
was not the episode.
But it is now.
There be a lot of ways that I feel like, respectfully, not to y'all, but just like to the general public, to the general public, there are a lot of ways in which I feel like we can be so invested in blackness that we don't interrogate the ways in which like our black investment is an internalization of whiteness, right? Like I feel this way about like them like Hotep as Egypt is the greatest country civilization niggas, because I'm like, bro, Egypt also happened to be the only country that all those like racial scientists didn't consider African, right? So you're taking something that is white accepted and then promoting it as the pinnacle of blackness, right? That's just black through a white lens. The same thing I feel like can happen when we align with these certain characters. Is like, does this character feel black to you because of how you specifically think about blackness, or does this character feel black to you because of what you have been taught to think about blackness as it relates to like some of the things that reform or are byproducts of the oppressive structure that we are inside of? You know what I'm saying?
That's a fair question. That's a
Yeah.
fair thesis statement. Right? I like it.
This is how you get your doctorate's degree. For all those that are
wondering.
PhD candidates, it's not right here.
And just watch Dragon Ball Z.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I think that's I see your point. I probably would still invite Piccolo, but I see your point on why you'd be like,
I'll support that.
I
I respect that for you.
I love that for
That's the first time
you.
it's been used.
Yeah.
He can be your friend.
You're not homies. You're not kinfolk.
Like I would probably hang out with Piccolo, especially if he got them beans on deck.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
True.
Yeah.
That's
But like, am I
hilarious.
letting him cook a meal? No.
Okay.
We do not want his macaronis.
Nah.
No
He
cheese.
could come and get a plate. For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
fair. Okay.
Yeah.
You get a plate.
Yeah.
Does
You get a
Piccolo
plate.
put raisins in his potato salad?
Piccolo. Nigga, I ain't never seen a Namekian eat.
Yo!
Photosynthesize, right?
I've never.
All everybody else be eating except Piccolo. He just meditate. I guess that's his sustenance. I don't know what the fuck they do.
He sets up the sun, dog. There you go. That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
What was the original question? I forget. We went on a tangent,
we did.
but I.
That was like a rabbit tongue.
Oh.
That wasn't even a hole. That was
a what was it? Black hole.
a black hole. That was for sure.
That was good.
Piccolo didn't make it.
I think it was you asking why the specific art.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, the specific art form.
Yeah.
I think he answered.
I think he did.
Yeah. I mean, I have nothing to add.
Sometimes
you just
further
do
questions.
No comments.
Ditto on that. So I'm gonna kind of get into Immortal Dark now.
Okay.
So when I read through what you sent us with Immortal Dark and everything, and to me it felt like, oh no, actually this might have been through the interview with Blerd on the Street, but like Nico, he has a focus, North Star, right? Like, and it seems like it's kind of a story of like what happens when that North Star dies. And to me that felt very Vinland Saga. Of like he had that thing, he's like, oh no, like we gonna go at it, like I'm gonna kill you, and then like it went left. Spoilers. And so I was like, when I heard that you liked anime, I was like, did you like, was like Vinland Saga like a part of that, like, or it just happens to be? Because that's another thing with anime, to speak about like blackness and how things might be black adjacent and how we perceive blackness from what we are seen and shown through media. A lot of black characters don't got like no dads, right? And it's like, surprisingly enough, obviously he's a Viking, so I'm not like, he can definitely come to the cookout.
Thorfinn, a lot of anime protagonists in general don't be having dads.
Right.
That's true. Yeah.
But be that as it may, Nico and like losing his North Star, where did that come from someplace, or was it just what happened?
I never thought about the Vinland Saga comparison until you said it just now. And I'm a big Vinland Saga person. So I appreciate that. That made me feel warm inside. Short answer is nah. I didn't have nothing to do with it.
Don't worry up on me.
It actually had a lot to do with my relationship with my great grandmother. So I was raised predominantly by my great grandmother. That's who I lived with when I was born, and she just did a lot of things that were equally as harmful to the family as beneficial. Right? She raised 5 generations of the family. You know what I'm saying? And she made sure nobody ever forgot that shit.
It's quite a task.
It is quite a task, and I also feel like sometimes good tasks are not done from the healthiest of spaces.
Oh yeah,
for sure. And I think, and I'm a big participator in separation theory, meaning I don't necessarily think one thing always means the next. So I do think she had good intentions, and I think she did good actions, but I think a lot of those things were inspired by her own traumas that she did not navigate, which is a very human thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And once the dementia really set in, she wasn't even of the right mind to be accountable, right? And there were a lot of impacts that this had on me from various stances. I mean, once me, my mom, and my sister really started caring for her, my mom also got cancer, and then the growth of her tumor was a direct tied to the stress that my great grandmother was causing in the house. And I don't mean causing by way of us having to caretake. I mean direct participant in terms of abusive language, all of these things, right? And then there were a lot of family frictions, both including when I was younger, me and my mom didn't always get along, and my granny was a large reason in that happening. And so when she passed in 2016, there was just a lot of unresolved energy I had. You know what I'm saying? And then I had nothing to do with it, because it's well, ideally, what would help absolve some of this energy is some type of conversation and acknowledgement of these actions. She was done, so you know what I'm saying? And not to mention, by the time she was in hospice, she didn't even remember who I was. She thought I was her brother. And that was a whole other layer of things, right? And so when I started formulating Immortal Dark, I reread a large portion of my poetry to see what a through line was, because I was doing research, and one of the mangakas that I was following had said not to create the story you want to see, create the story you care about. And so I was well, whatever I care about is going to be a through line in my writing, so let me reread all of this stuff. And what came up was I'm always grappling with some level of generational trauma. So I was okay, that needs to be. Yeah, right.
We might not
the
know
little
it.
hour.
Yeah, we might not know it. Yeah. And so I was that clearly needs to be my focal point, because it's the reoccurring thing. And then I saw another video that talked about you can get really good stories out of answering a question you don't yet have an answer to. And at the time, what I didn't have an answer to is what do I do when the person I need accountability from is no longer present. And my granny was the biggest example of that, but there are other examples as well, in my life trajectory. And so that's essentially where the story actually came from. And then the whole him being dead was a byproduct of both that and my love for My Hero Academia. And I'll tie it together. My Hero Academia was one of the first anime I could think of where, at least it felt new to me, where I was watching a story that was about a character who was inactive. All of My Hero Academia is really us watching the ripple effects of All Might's actions. But we're watching it from the standpoint of the main cast. But nothing in My Hero happens without All Might and his feud with All For One, right? And so that put in my mind oh shoot, I can have a really dope story without the catalyst being present.
Okay.
And like I just combine those two ideas of like, you know, answering this question and then like this thing I felt like I was picking up on with my hero, and then I just like smashed them together.
Hope Smash.
Yeah.
Detroit Smash. There it is.
Yeah.
That's what you did there.
Yeah.
That was good.
Call it the Delaware Smash.
He does have a Delaware move. I was hype about that. I was like,
Oh,
We out here.
North side. Oh,
That's
man.
the clip. That's the clip right there. That's it.
Did you have another question? I heard you.
Oh, I was so again tying it back to my background. So with the continent of Jura, am I pronouncing it correct?
Jura, yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure I
appreciate it.
So it's very complex, very vast. Like, what influenced the world building for it? Because I think like across anime, a lot of people don't really consider the environment or the world that the anime is set in. I mean, sure, they notice when it gets destroyed, right?
Yeah.
But that's it. Like the complexity, the reasoning behind it. You know, whether it's placed in a city, whether it's placed in an urban environment. Like these are decisions I feel every author makes distinctively.
Yeah.
Like it's purposeful.
Yeah.
So why?
All the good ones.
All the good ones. All the good ones.
This kind of goes back to like that research period I was in. So like to give a little context, I had been like trying to stick with a concept for a while. I have a Google Drive full of concepts, but it's just like none of them were like really sticking with me. And so I was like, well, I've done all this research around like anime and manga in general. Like, why don't I do research on the actual creation process? And then like that led me to a video of a mangaka talking about create the world first and then create your main characters. And they basically their argument for this was when you create the world first, you're able to create an environment that is interesting whether or not people find all of your characters interesting. Because there's a thought out world with complexity in it. And I guess to like tie back to my hero, we don't even need Deku in the episode for us to be interested. Because the world is interested.
Sure.
In and of itself. You know what I'm saying? I would even make the same argument for Naruto. Right? Like I feel like every Naruto fan has a village that they would have loved to see and explored.
Okay.
Equally as much or more than the Leaf Village, right?
Sure. Okay.
And so following that same concept, I was like, okay, this makes sense to me. And I don't know if this is like my big logic brain or if this is like me being on the spectrum, but like if something makes sense to me, I don't really got no more questions after that. I'm like, all right, solid, right? So I went through the process of building the world first, and I really like repurposing shit. Like that's kind of where the whole like Nico and River being like of an alchemist culture came from, but like the alchemists in this world can turn their skin gold as opposed to like other things to gold. I have a lot of fun with thinking about how things we already understand could be different. And so using that as kind of like my springboard, all of the countries in Jura are re-envisionings of things like I really enjoy. So like the country Immortalis, which is where like Nico and River's lineage is from, they're all alchemists, and I mean I'm a big Full Metal Alchemist fan. I like that whole equal exchange thing. So they're like a very meditative heavy country, and the whole like alchemy turning the skin to gold, like all of that was fun there. Then like there's another country called Lunaris, which is more of a like nightlife Shinjuku district type of vibe, a lot of like feudal Japan elements and things like that, because I find all of that interesting. But then like also like thinking about like, okay, like if this is a night centric space, like what are ways I could be creative with that? So like a lot of people in Lunaris practice what's called like umbromancy, which is the ability to manipulate shadows and things like that. Then like there's another country called Gnosis, which is they're like not into spiritual energy or none of that shit. They like, yo, technology, nigga, that's where we at. And I also like am a big sci-fi nerd, right? And so it's like there were like vestiges of things I really enjoyed poured into like all of the cultures that I came up with in the whole continent itself. Yeah.
So, I mean, each one of your characters has like their own unique struggle, right? Their own story. Which character for you was the most difficult or the easiest to develop?
I think the most difficult
And why? Obviously, that's my theme today. Is why
is Nico's dad, Savan. And I mean, he's not, from what y'all have seen yet, he's not a character, but like I have 2 full seasons written. So like it just, illustration is expensive. So like 3 chapters is out, but I have 30.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm still like writing more. And Nico and River's father was the hardest to write because he was a character that, for all intents and purposes, like is the representation of my granny, right? But I have to write him in a way that feels humanistic, or else like he just falls into that black and white villain good guy thing, and I don't want it to be that. I want all of my characters to have some semblance of like, and like for the readers to be able to be like, yo, I might not agree, but I understand. I see how you got there, right?
Piccolo. Hashtag Piccolo.
So I don't know if we see how he got there, but but like, yeah. So like I had to really humanize him, which then also a byproduct of that is like humanizing my granny in a way that didn't necessarily feel comfortable, because like I'm cool if I got information. If you can give me the information, I can put the dots together. But like I didn't have as much information on her past, because I mean when I was born she was 70. I in general come from a very old family, so like by the time I was old enough to really inquire about anything, a lot of these niggas was dead. Right? So that was probably the hardest character to write. I think the funnest character to write, so the main story takes place in Solterra, which for all intents and purposes can be considered like an America. Like you have people from all of the different avenues of Jura here. And the president is this woman called, her name is Amun Ra. She no one knows anything about her besides like what I posted on the IG account. And she's just such a fucking like stand on it nigga. And I really like writing that because I don't have to think as hard about it because she's straightforward.
Okay.
It's like whatever the character is saying is what it is.
Yeah.
Right? And like I get to like, this is gonna be a side tangent, but I'm a loop it in.
Okay.
I always say that most people, I would argue, really enjoy Drake music because they like the way they sound saying what he's saying, right? Like, it's not necessarily that they believe Drake or that they give a fuck about if Drake is honest. It's the fact that Drake is saying something, and when I say it, I feel a thing, right? It's the reciting of the lyrics that make niggas Drake fans, right?
Hot take. Okay.
And I think there's a level of bravado that is engaged in that, right? Similarly, tying it back in, writing Amun Ra allows me to engage with a level of bravado that I don't get to engage with the other characters because there's no foil to it.
Okay.
She just like, I'm gonna beat your ass. And there's no like, oh, this is secret, or they're gonna go off to a corner and like cry or fall into themselves about it. She's fine. She's like, I'm gonna beat your ass. And you either take that and you get beat, or you don't, right?
With this information, what you will.
And that is like so fun to write, especially because she's a woman character, and like is one of the strongest characters that will be present in the manga. So yeah.
So with the this is good. So with that, like with the character development, how did you keep in mind or were you keeping it in mind, like representation and tonality, things that growing up we didn't see in our animated worlds, right? How did you? What was the thought process as you were developing your characters, and like were there some things that you kept in mind, and how did you?
This is a tricky question for me. Primarily because like I feel like I am a communal person, and so there aren't many things I'm doing where I'm not thinking about community. It's almost like second nature for me.
Okay.
So I don't really have to stretch to like think inclusively. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And like I have a pretty diverse friend group.
Okay.
And like I don't mean that in a typical way. I feel like people be meaning that. Like
I got black friends.
Yeah,
I got like 3 white friends.
Yeah, right. Like most of my niggas is black, but it's a very diverse spectrum of blackness.
Oh, you're not a monolith?
Yeah, surprise, right? Like I got homies that are not even from America. You know what I'm saying? I got queer homies. I got homies in different mental health spaces. I got homies who care about the communal shit. I got homies that selfish as fuck. Right? Like it spans like the thing, and I feel like because of like my own lived experiences, I just really like lean into a lot of like the trauma informed practices like as a lifestyle. So I am engaging with most people with the understanding that like we are all living a human experience and we're all doing with that what we know how to do or what we feel like is possible. And so like because there's no like hierarchy in my mind around like who is worthy of representation and who is not, like I just throw it all in to like the best of my own ability, right? Like, and then some of it is also I really enjoy Afrofuturism, and I wouldn't necessarily consider Immortal Dark Afrofuturism, but the way it ties for me is like one of the things I really enjoy about Afrofuturism is that it shows us what is possible, and so there's also a level of like intentionality I have in showing things that may not currently exist, but like that are very possible and like we won't fall apart. Like Canada, another country in Immortal Dark, which is where Enoch is from, the entire country is non-binary. It's just like a state of being. You're born, you're non-binary. That's it. And they still get pregnant, they still populate, they still do all the shit, right? Without the concept of gender, because it's not a necessity. You know what I'm saying? And it's like being able to show that, even if it is in a fictional space, I think just by way of this conversation and where we started in this conversation, there is proof that seeing something fictional can have real life implications. You know what I'm saying? Like if me and Lindo can sit here and say like, oh, you know, we saw these fantastical things and it made us feel something about our own survival rate, that spans across any topic. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
I would love to bounce, I think the first question, and we can get to the secondary question to you as well, of like why pick Philly and why because in your story Philly has universal health care. So, and like we're gonna get into it more like later, definitely, but like why pick Philly?
It goes back to what Enoch said. It's just something I really care about. Like Philly has just, like my whole heart. Anytime I felt like I was in pieces, Philly held me whole. It's the main reason why I have a career. It's the main reason why I'm a professional poet. So I wanted to, you know, with all the characters in Pawnshop, I wanted to write from a place of not just relatability, but things I cared about, people I cared about. So Philly is something I cared about so much. So I wanted to imagine what it meant for me to give it so much care. So I created a world where it had this level of care given to it. And therefore, you know, I was like, universal health care. What if that was a thing here? And therefore, how does the people around Philly exist with that? With that level of care?
Okay. We're definitely going to come back to that because it's very interesting how you set it up. And the sandbox that you create, there are paths that can be that you can walk down.
Mhm.
But we're gonna come back to that. Speaking of characters and how their powers work, the powers of Nico, River, and Shula are fantastically black.
Oh, thank you.
Nico having the ability for onyx skin is a really cool visual. River being able to turn her skin into gold feels like a play on golden brown skin. And then Shula's ability to store solar energy is such a cool way of thinking about melanin.
Mm.
Could you talk about the process of coming up with these powers?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't think
Y'all
anybody's asking that.
doing your research. Y'all reading books and stuff, thinking about it. Look at y'all.
Niggas reading.
Yeah. So, you know, with the river and the gold skin thing, I really like powers that involve like skin transformation. Like
Okay.
Colossus is one of my favorite X-Men.
Oh,
You know what I'm
okay.
saying? Like I really enjoy that. And my editor Tommy Horsey, shout out to Tommy. He had brought up one time, going back to something that came up earlier of me having a gluten allergy. I have what's called dermatitis herpetiformis, which means like when I eat something with gluten in it, I like break out in open sores.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Oh.
Prior to having that, I also just had eczema. So I don't know if there's some type of tie there.
That's a billable
You know
hour.
what I'm
That's a
saying?
billable hour.
Yeah, because I haven't like explored that.
Yeah.
But it's something he pointed out to me, and I was like, that you I have to bring it up to my therapist, right? So like with River being you know, an alchemist, that inherently means that like her skin will be gold, and like me having like a family of alchemists being the focal point was because I like the whole skin transformation thing. Now when we get to Nico and the onyx skin. Writing Nico, I was like, all right. Another thing that like came up in a lot of my research is there has to be something that makes your main character deviate from the norm, right? We see this in like Black Clover, for example, with Asta's magic being anti-magic, right? We see this with Naruto, with him being a person in the village. He's a Jinchuriki, right? Like we see this in like all these different ways across different animes, and so I was like, all right. Well, his skin finna be different, and there is like an actual real world explanation for it, which like I won't spoil because it does come up later in the story. But it has to do lightly with the fact that like River and Nico's mom is not an alchemist. She's of a different culture. So then I was like, well, I also want him to have some type of built-in advantage as like the person who technically is less skilled, right? Like River is older than him. She's been training much longer than him. She, you know, left the home before he did, like all of these things, right? And so like, what is stopping him from just completely getting stomped out? I also wanted to not turn his skin any color that was remotely adjacent to white. Like when I think about Super Saiyans and like, oh, they get powered up when they have blonde hair and green eyes, like miss me with that shit, bro. I'm good on that, right? So I
not
know.
Piccolo.
You said what?
Not Piccolo though.
Well,
Jesus.
Piccolo turned light skin.
This?
Yeah. And the Dragon
orange.
Ball Heroes.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Like, oh,
You
essentially,
would like the light.
bro, essentially in Dragon Ball, you can't become powerful unless you become lighter. I'm gonna leave that alone.
Don't look at me.
I'm gonna leave that alone. Even you feel me? The Saiyans being enslaved by a nigga with actual white skin. Anyway, because we not here to talk about
And
Not-
they're being called monkeys.
bro.
I'm saying.
So-
Tails.
And I don't think Akira Toriyama was thinking about any of that shit. I just think it happens to be
It's just
coincidental.
that's a wild coincidence.
Yeah,
It's wild.
But either way, so I was like, you know, no like platinum skin, none of that shit,
Yeah.
right? So then I started researching what are materials that are harder than gold, and onyx is harder than gold. And I also just like the like black sheen aesthetic.
Yeah,
because
that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
I was like, that shit's sick.
And I was also thinking about like I was thinking a little bit about Luke Cage, and it's like, well, what does that look like? Like to be ultra black, you know what I'm
To be
saying?
a mineral. Like
Yeah.
Ultra.
And so that's how I got to like Nico having the
Domain
onyx skin, and then with Shula, you know, she's Ifrit, which that's the name of the culture that lives in the sun peaks, and all of them basically store solar energy in their melanin. And I kind of got to that just by thinking about like what's a supernatural way to think about being black. You know what I'm saying? And not even really just. I mean, for me, it was being black, but I mean, we all actually require sunlight, like realistically.
Sure.
I just don't care about other people besides black people. Or black adjacent. Right?
Piccolo.
But yeah, if you alabaster, I'm not really concerned about you. But yeah, so I was like, what would be a cool like take on that? And then I was like, oh, you know, what if it was like all the solar energy we was stirring could like be repurposed in all these different ways? And so that's kind of how I got to that. And there are like other aspects of her abilities that like manifest culturally that just like haven't come up yet. But it is all tied to like how they use the solar energy in the body.
Cool.
Yeah.
I have one more like character question. And because this is interesting because of everything that you just said. So like, why include the white man with Commander Beza? In some ways, I feel like I get it, and it totally tracks with the white man being the embodiment of the bootstrap mentality, self-righteous, self-serving, self-centered characteristics that you gave him in the character bio. You gave him.
Yeah.
Right. But on the other hand, everything else seems so blackety black. Why make Commander Beza a white guy?
So I'm gonna give you the honest answer. He wasn't supposed to be white. It was a miscommunication between me and the artist. Yeah. So Beza.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
Being from, so he's from Alabastria, which is like an offshoot island of Jura, but it's an island that's like covered in like tundra. It's like a frozen island. And the character description originally lists him as having pale brown skin. So he was essentially just supposed to look like a really ashy nigga, right? I mean, a lot of his functionings in the story pretty ashy for real. But I don't know what it was, because the artist who originally did like the initial character arts that came out was French, black but French. And so I think maybe there was like something with the translation, because I know English wasn't his first language.
Fair.
And when he sent me the character art, Basil was white. And you know, probably like him having blonde hair and blue eyes, you know, I don't know what Camo was thinking. That's the artist's name. But I could see how he could potentially have made the mistake.
I see how we got here.
Yeah. And like, because I was paying for everything out of pocket, and I was not in the financial position I'm in currently in life.
Hey, redo this.
Yeah, I was like, I guess he white now.
Like, what can I do?
Yeah. But the good thing is, and this actually is what I plan to do, because he hasn't come up in the story yet. Like,
oh my bad.
No, you're fine. Because it's public knowledge.
I thought this was cool.
It is cool, because like no one, like, you know of the character, but you have no idea like what his role in the thing is. Fair. Right? When he does finally come up in the manga, it's gonna be the original complexion I desire. Yeah, I'm just gonna switch it back, because like, what are y'all gonna do?
Yeah.
Right?
You have no power.
You merely adopted the doctor.
So yeah, that shit was a complete mistake, bro. It was a complete mistake.
That's wild. That's like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it was like, it fits, but like and then like he's from Alabastria. I was like, okay, sure. Like, maybe all the white people are like,
it ain't finna.
But
I'm
like,
gonna tell you right now, it ain't finna be no important white people in this story.
Fair enough.
Like, they are extras.
No white savior complex.
Nah, there might be. It's not even no white villains, because I don't even like the juxtaposition. Right, like this idea that if we have a black hero, we gotta have a white villain, or if we have a white hero, we gotta have a dark color. Like the whole dark light thing. I'm just over the juxtaposition as a whole, and so I'm like, bruh, like they only background characters.
It's like, we can have our own villains too.
Yeah, right, absolutely.
Because some people really enjoy villains. So like let's make a villain that like somebody likes.
Yeah,
That
and
we
like Beza is another one where it's like he is horrible,
Seems like it.
but there are also like real humanistic reasons why he developed the personality that he developed, and it'll like get into that. Every character who is part of the main cast in some shape or form is dealing with grief. It's not all like grief of a person, but all of them, like even Enochi with the leg brace, like there is a grieving they are constantly dealing with the fact that they can't fight, coming from a culture of people who like to fight.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And she was like top tier.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
Jura?
yeah. So it's like everyone in some form of is dealing with grief, and that includes the antagonist. Yeah.
Last note I have: Aurum Manus, Golden Hand. Makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, you did your research.
Do what I can.
Yeah.
You got any questions?
Well, I was gonna say, pivoting. Speaking of like grief, depression, gaslighting, how did you? Sorry, I'm gonna throw that one in there for Pawnshop. How did you? And this I'm kind of circling around development because I love the thought process. Right?
Yeah,
Like, I love
as a developer.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, there's that. How did you kind of pick the level of representation for these kind of emotions being represented in your stories, and combining that with like the world of like sci-fi and so what was that process like for you?
It was easy. Like we already.